Amen. Well, Amy, why don't you come up? And as Amy comes up, there's some flyers for Christmas at the back of the church. And I would invite you to take a few of these flyers. They're not for you, they're for someone that you know. Take them away and give them to people. And let's be invitational. Let's be welcoming to our friends and our neighbours this year. Amy, it's so wonderful to have you preach. Amy is an intern with us this year, and maybe we'll share something about that. We love having you with us, and you're also a student. You're in your third year, I think, and you're just a wonderful asset to the team. So thank you so much for being part of the journey at this time. And we're looking forward to what you have to share with us today. Just a bit of advance warning. As part of the talk, there's going to be an opportunity just to turn around in groups and discuss a couple of points. I know for some of us that's like, no, don't make me do that. People learn in different ways. Some of us learn by just listening, others by talking. So there'll be an opportunity a bit later. Amy, can I pray for you? Father, thank you so much for your servant Amy. Thank you, Lord, for her attentiveness to your voice and her obedience to open her own lips and to preach this morning. Be with her, be with us by your Spirit, we pray. Amen.
Hello. Okay, so today we're doing the last sermon in the series that we've been doing on Matthew. There have been 5 different discourses that we've looked at, big passages in the Bible that are really significant in Matthew, and today we're in for the last instalment. So I thought I would start easy and ask you, what are you afraid of? This is just something to ponder throughout the service, but I thought I would start with a big question because that's my style. We're going to go straight into a game because I thought I would shake things up. And the game is word association. So you may have done this before. You just need to turn to the person you're sat next to and one of you to say one of the words in bold and then just see what the person says as the first thought that comes into their mind. So for example, if someone said to me, fairy lights, I would say joy, because I love fairy lights. So it's just the first thought. There's no right answer. And I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to do that. So just turn to the person next to you and pick a word and see what they say. Yeah. Okay, I hope that wasn't too painful, too difficult. I'm afraid I am going to ask you to talk to each other again. So this was just the warm-up activity. Yeah, you're in for a fun time. Okay, I'm now going to do the Bible reading. It is from Matthew, chapter 25, verses 31 to 46. So chapter 25, then we're looking at the parable of the sheep and the goats, and it is 31 to 46. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another, as the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on the right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was ill, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you, the stranger, and invite you in, or see you ill or in prison and go and visit you?" The king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these, brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Then he will say to those on his left, Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was ill and in prison, and you did not look after me. They will also answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger in needing clothes, or ill or in prison, and did not help you? And he will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for the least of these, you did not do for me. Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. So the title for today's talk is It's Binary. And what that means is there are two options. There are sheep and there are goats. There is those who are blessed and welcomed in, and those who are not, who are sent somewhere else. So I thought, because this is the last one in the series, that we'd have a look at where we've come from and where we're going. So we have done 12 services. 3 have been altogether. 1 has been a Faith in Action. We've had guest speakers. You might remember that we had Bishop Ruth and the name of the guy that I've forgotten that does Ascension Church. Thank you. And the key themes that have come up through all of these talks is that we are called, we are messengers, and we are sent. There have been 5 discourses in Matthew, and we're looking at the last one today. We've had some parables, you might remember. We've had things about wheat and chaff. We've had finding the lost coin. Today we have a parable about sheep and goats. And as I was reflecting on all of the different things that people have said, then I think the things that draw all of these 5 sections together are love, sacrifice, and the consequences of free will. So, heavy stuff. There are 28 chapters in Matthew, and the reason we end on chapter 25, it's beautifully timed for this week, is because next week, Advent begins. So next Sunday, 1st of December, is when Advent starts, and chapter 26 is where what we recognise as the Christmas story begins. So we're perfectly in sync, which I find very satisfying. But one of the themes that has come up, and the people who've been preaching have said, is that when we read the Bible, it can make us uncomfortable. There are hard decisions to be made, and we have free will, and it's up to us whether we are welcomed in at the end of the story, like the sheep, or we are left aside, like the goats. So I wonder what your response is, reflecting on those themes as we approach Advent. Where do you feel you're at with God? Okay, warning, now is the group discussion element of the talk. So I'm going to put some images up on the screen, and I'd like you to turn around, form groups of 6-ish people, and discuss these questions. Do you think they're accurate images? What do the words heaven and hell mean to you? And what emotions do these images evoke? If in your group of 6, you could find someone who's a little bit more extroverted, and then they can be your spokesperson for the group. And then in a minute, when you've had some discussion, then I'll ask the spokespeople to feedback what their group has talked about. So these are the first 4 images. So the questions are up on the screen. Form groups, 6-ish people. There's like a starry sky. There are clouds with a bright light and a staircase. There are 2 angels, one from heaven, one from hell. And then there are some people who are looking out into the beyond and reflecting on life. So if you could turn to people, form groups of 6, and discuss these questions. What do they evoke for you? What are your responses? Yeah. Okay, just before we feed back, I'm going to put the second round of images up. So, have a look. What do these images evoke for you? Do you think they're accurate? What emotions do you have in response? And remember to select your spokesperson so that in a minute they're ready to sum up your group discussion in a couple of sentences. Okay. Okay, so if you draw your group discussions to a close, have spokespeople ready. Okay, we'll start here and work our way around. I'll give you the microphone and then you can feed back in a couple of sentences what your group discussed.
We started off a bit like that. There was a sense that your upbringing shaped the way you saw these pictures and understood heaven and hell. And for some, their upbringing created a sense of fear, that actually there was a fear about sort of choosing. You've got to choose the escalator that goes up, otherwise it's escalator go down. Was fear a good thing or was fear a bad thing? Is it healthy to have fear? That we also talked about how there's a sense that heaven is up there somewhere in the sky because we see Jesus ascending into heaven. So he seemed to go upwards. What else? Oh, there was a sense that kind of, as much as we talk about experiencing a foretaste of heaven here in this life on earth, could we be experiencing a foretaste of hell, with all the suffering that goes on and the evil that we see around? Is hell the sort of antithesis, the opposite to heaven? And are we experiencing as much of that as we see heaven? They were our thoughts.
Thank you. Okay. I'll hand over now to this group. Who is your spokesperson?
Yeah, so we had quite diverging views. We didn't all agree on whether hell existed or whether heaven or hell were even after death, or if people could actually be living in a hell on earth through their situation. So it's kind of the same point how people's lives and experiences can affect their perceptions of whether they even believe in it, because you might want retribution or justice, so you might more believe in hell. What else did we say? Yep, that's it.
Thank you. Okay, who's the spokesperson for you guys?
So we focused a lot on what the pictures were. So the top left one, we had two different kind of views of it. One was that it looks quite scary because it's very dark, and another one that it was quite beautiful because it's representing God's creation, possibly. We talked a lot about journeys and how the escalator and the ladder and also the red blob that the person's walking into look like you're going somewhere, and it shows the journey of going to heaven or going to hell. And also, again, the escalator giving a choice.
Thank you. Are you guys another group? Yep.
Similarly to that last group, we looked at the first one and thought lots about creation and didn't necessarily think it was heaven and hell. And we talked lots about the one that from here looks like Glastonbury Tor, but then we realised it's actually people, and how the kind of idea that you're looking towards the light, and when you kind of look up to the sky, it can make you realise, you kind of bring your head up from your world to actually something bigger, that we're part of something bigger.
Thank you. Over to you guys.
Well, we came to the conclusion that no matter where there's darkness, there's always light. That was after we actually realised what the pictures were, because it took us a few minutes to see them properly. Also, we thought about how is hell actually a real place, or is it more mythological? And about really hell is actually just where God isn't, basically, and heaven is anywhere where God is. So that kind of ties in with, wherever there's darkness, always look for the light, and there's always going to be light eventually. So that's kind of what we come up with, really.
Thank you. Okay, you guys?
To avoid repeating what's already been said, we felt the most interesting things were the juxtaposition between certain images. So the image of the ladder leading up to the sky is quite a positive image, quite an uplifting one. But then it compares to the escalators, one of which is going into fire, which is quite an unsettlingly close physical proximity between the concepts of heaven and hell. Similarly, the picture of the stars on the top left, the transcendent beauty of the universe is inherent, and is, again, another very uplifting image. And then I felt that actually compared to the image of the fire on the right, because both space and fire are deeply inhospitable to people. But it's only when you actually see the humans within it that you realise just how painful that experience could be up close.
Thank you.
Yeah, to avoid repeating thoughts, some of us thought that with the escalators, maybe that was emulating to a choice that we had between going to heaven or going to hell. The stars in the sky, whether that was the beginning, like creation, or the end. And the people standing on the rock looking to heaven, it looks far away and then it looks near. That might reflect where we are in our heads at the time. And then there another thought of, we're taught a lot, it's about heaven and earth, and God is in heaven effectively, and we were all together, and he's trying to bring him back down to us on earth so we can all be as one again. So hell felt quite weird and foreign.
Okay, last group.
There's been some great thoughts. So the heaven photos first, I was actually quite perturbed by them because, like was mentioned before, you can't survive in space. And that ladder doesn't have a handrail and looks very high up. The sky looks frozen, and it's all unknown. And that boy is standing on water, maybe. And it was quite unsettling, and maybe it's not a very human place for existence. And then when the hell photos came up, or pictures came up, I think we were all had a sense of sadness. We felt that there are some people on earth who have been burned alive, and it's not just an artist's impression. That's a reality in our history. And it was interesting to talk about the dark and the light, and that is spoken of in the Bible. Hell and damnation and fire and brimstone, but also there are other ways of describing it. Of you'll be cast into utter darkness. So we felt that it was more metaphorical, but equally not a nice place to be.
Okay, thank you very much. So these are some images that came up when I typed in heaven or I typed in hell to Google. So the question about whether they're accurate their accuracy is not really, I think, what the people are going for. But it was really interesting to see the different images that come up. The most glaring thing is that when you type in heaven, light. So much light. Lots of clouds as well, but very bright images. And most of them are kind of blue and yellow. You type in hell, red. Everything is fire. That is the consistent thing for all of the images. Some of them are entirely fire. And there's quite a lot of violence that that comes up. So going back to the Bible reading, I wonder how the words that we did in the game at the beginning, the images that we've discussed, and then the Bible passage, do these link up for you? Do they feel like contradictory messages? Are they alien concepts? And maybe as you were reflecting on these and thinking back of the other services that we've had, then a sense of discomfort is what you felt. When I think about the first question, what am I afraid of? Then there are all sorts of things that come to mind. Some things are silly. I don't like watching films where you have that moment and you can feel the music building and then you're like, oh, that thing's happened. I knew something was going to jump out at me and then it did. I am a big jumper at films. But more seriously, something I'm afraid of is getting to the end of my life and facing God and being asked something like, how do you justify, Amy, ignoring people who were suffering, who were in need, people who were thirsty, who needed clothes and resources, people who were in prison and were lonely, all of those things that we hear in the reading. And I think the world tells us that you can be a neutral person. You're not going around beating people up, you're not bullying people, you're doing well. Or you can be a super great person, brownie points, giving to charity, being really generous, opening up your home, all of those things. But neutral is safe. Neutral is not doing anything bad, but not doing anything super, super good either. And that's fine. But actually, when I read this passage, what I see is that inaction is a choice. Choosing to do nothing, to be apathetic, to walk away from people who are suffering, that is also a choice. And that scares me because I think, oh, well, I'm a good person. I'm not actively causing evil in the world or suffering or deliberately creating injustice. So that's okay. And sometimes I'm great and I give to charity and I campaign for causes of injustice and I stand up for what I believe in and I think, yes, God is with me in this situation. But I would say, there is times in my Monday to Friday when I'm going around different things that I do, and I'm in the neutral space. I'm not contributing to suffering, but I'm walking past people who are. And I'm choosing apathy because apathy is easier, and it's not something that we're often challenged to step out of. If I was to start being violent towards people, I think some people might comment and say, Amy, what on earth are you doing? This doesn't look like you. This is bad. Stop. But if I'm just being apathetic and just walking past, how many people stop me and say, Amy, you talk about injustice and you talk about how we are God's hands and feet and that we have a role on earth to represent him and the values that we hear in the Bible. What are you doing? Stop. Pause your day. There are people who are suffering. What are you going to do about it? When we think about the needs that are talked about in the passage, then you may be familiar with this kind of triangle concept of the pyramid of needs. And when I was looking at this, I noticed, you probably won't be able to see because the writing is quite small, but the very bottom layer is psychological needs: food, water, warmth, and rest. And the things that are talked about in the passage fall under all of those categories. So we're not actually even being asked to cater for the very top. The top includes people feeling fulfilled, reaching their potential, and having creative activities in their life. So what God is asking us to do is only the bottom layer of the pyramid. And that was really challenging to me to think, I'm quite daunted by the mass suffering I see in the world. And I find visiting prisons and feeding people who are hungry, that's challenging. That's only the bottom layer. There are all these other things that psychologists see that we need in order to be fulfilled and to follow our calling and step into those big challenges of life. But we are called to respond to the bottom layer, because without the bottom layer, you've got no chance. You cannot go up and feel safe, feel like you belong, feel proud of yourself, have a sense of identity. All of those things are deprived from you if the bottom layer is not met. And that is what we are called to respond to. Obviously, I'm not going to talk without mentioning the general election. The general election is on my birthday. Wahey. Joel mentioned earlier praying for candidates and politicians and leaders and policymakers is something that is probably on your hearts and minds at the moment. Today is the 24th of November, which means if you haven't registered to vote, you have a whole 2 days left. And I wonder, when you think about suffering, when you think about the choices that we have to make, whether we are the sheep or the goats, those who respond and are welcomed in, or those who are not, I wonder how that feeds into the decisions you make on a day-to-day basis. Whether that is the decision to give generously, to pause your day and put others' needs before your own. And then on a bigger scale, what does that look like when we are thinking about the laws that are passed? Where is money going to be spent? Who are the kinds of people we want to be making those decisions? So I'd ask you, as you go to the polling station, as you cast your vote, which I'm sure you will all do, and do with joy, because voting is so exciting, then I wonder if you could think about those questions. You could think about the values that you would like to see reflected in our elected officials. I'm going to close with this quote, which comes from an Amnesty course that I did a few years ago. And it says, "We need to learn to be human again, human to humans." Very simple quote, but profoundly powerful. We need to learn to be human again, human to humans. Okay. I shall hand back to Joel. Thank you very much for getting involved and stepping out your comfort zone. It's massively appreciated.
Thank you so much, Amy. Wasn't that great? What a treat. Thank you so much. Would you like to stand?